Hello, and welcome to our second week of spiritual recovery, a metaphysical journey through the 12 steps. And I'm Michelle Ingalls. Last week, I started off with about a 20-minute presentation explaining my purpose for starting the group. And I also defined the words I'd be using a lot: metaphysics, spiritual, and my broad overview of addiction. And I gave some resources that we'll use throughout the coming weeks as well. And that presentation is on the Facebook page. And if you're watching this, you must be on the Facebook page. So please feel free to watch that if you'd like some more information, or you can always contact me as well. In that same video, I also give a brief explanation of why I think that the 12-step program and metaphysics support each other. They're both programs that are based in my opinion, some solid principles that are applicable to any life situation. They're resilient and foundational. And when applied earnestly and honestly, they work. They're reliable. You know, I practice a metaphysical philosophy called science of mind, not to be confused with Scientology or Christian Science. We're a metaphysical philosophy. And just like the 12-step program, when these spiritual principles are applied through the various spiritual practices that we teach, they're a method of change. And the same can be said for this 12-step program. When the principles are applied, it is a program of change. That's how it's designed, a program to move you from one state of being to another state of being, from one perspective into another. And last week I explained that I've kind of expanded my definition of addiction to include anything that we ingest, alcohol, drugs, or anything that we do, eat too much, have too much sex, gamble, work too much, or anything that is a repetition of our patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving that are destructive to our life. You know, anything that we seek to make ourselves feel better from the outside in, anything that we habitually do to relieve some discomfort or make ourselves feel better by looking outside ourselves is, in my opinion, an addiction, which makes recovery then ultimately the process of looking within to resolve the issues we've been trying to solve by looking outward. You know, the first step we talked about last week, and just to review, the first step traditionally is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Of course, you can say addiction or whatever else that you would like to get over. We admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. You know, the first step requires a willingness to admit that whatever we've been doing just isn't working, and that we're ready to do whatever is necessary to facilitate a change, that we're willing to let go of our obsession or our addiction. And last week, I offered this as my metaphysical first step. I admit that I am powerless over my addiction, my dis-ease, at the level of my addiction or my dis-ease. When I look for something outside myself to make me feel better, then I am disempowered. But there is a solution within. Let me read that one more time. I admit that I am powerless over my addiction at the level of my addiction. When I look for something outside myself to make me feel better, then I am disempowered. But there is a solution within. Everything in metaphysics comes from the inside out, from this presence, power, whatever we want to call it, from within. So from a metaphysical view, everything's about perspective. You can't heal an addiction or a disease at the level of the addiction or the disease. You can heal, or we may want to say manage, because we know that at least addiction and alcoholism are progressive diseases that we manage, like diabetes or something else. So we can heal or manage an addiction or a disease from the level of our wholeness. So I'm viewing everything when I'm viewing everything from the level of my addiction or my disease, I'm never going to move out of it. I have to be willing to admit that what I'm doing isn't working, but that I believe there is a way forward, which leads us to the second step, which is the topic of today's meeting. So the second step is traditionally, the second step is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The second step is hopeful. You know, it says that we have come to believe sincerely that it is possible not to behave or engage in this behavior anymore. Now, this is where the 12-step program tends to get a lot of resistance because it implies a power implies God. And that word, as I said last week, carries with it a lot of baggage. And for me, this is a place where metaphysics can take a participating role and kind of support this idea. And because metaphysics acknowledges that there is a larger life and there is this organizing, intelligent, and even benevolent presence that is everywhere present, and that we can participate with it by participating with its natural laws. And I can certainly say more about that during our conversation, but I'm not going to go into it too deeply unless you have more questions as we move forward. So my metaphysical interpretation of this second step really doesn't change much, but I could say something like, came to believe that there is a universal principle that I am a part of and that can transform my life to the degree that I participate with it. I'm going to read that again. Came to believe that there is a universal principle that I am a part of that can transform my life to the degree that I participate with it. So both metaphysics and the 12-step program invite the participants to explore and experience this larger life or presence in our individual way. You know, there's nothing prescribed about it. And both say that no one else can tell us what that will look like. It's much too personal. The 12 steps ask that we open to a power that's greater than ourselves. And generally we say that it's probably benevolent, although the 12-step program doesn't even really say that. It just says the God of our understanding. Metaphysics does. It says that this is a benevolent presence, but honestly, it can be anything. We can think about it like this. The problem, the addiction, the disease originated in our thinking, in our own heads. And that thinking is not going to get us out of this situation. But there's a larger life, a clearer presence, if you will, that can help us shift our perception, because perception is everything if we want to create change. In Science of Mind, we say, change your thinking, change your life. And that sentiment has served me well. We obviously have been trying, maybe unwittingly, to solve some problem, the problem of being us, some sense of anxiety or lack of fulfillment. But the answer is not going to be found in our old thinking, in our old way of being. And step 2 invites us to explore that idea, an idea that there is a solution and it already exists. We just have to let it in, or just be willing to let it in. And in the next step, in step 3, we'll talk about what this presence can be and how we can experience it. It can be anything from a group collective consciousness to a supernatural entity to Jesus, Buddha consciousness, and we'll explore that in more depth next week. So I'd like to open up the conversation, and we will discuss steps 1 or 2. And if you're watching this video, I am not going to tape the discussion. So I invite you to join us every week at Monday evenings at 6:30, and the link is always in the Facebook post. All right, see you soon. Take care.